Testing, testing. Good morning and welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for February 8th, 2023. Before we get started with the consent agenda this morning, I have a few statements to make. First of all, at a meeting about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I commended your attention to reading PC 57, the Commission's Innovation Report. Among the many recommendations to those interested parties who have an interest before this commission is the need for the staff, the vital need for the commission to be adequately staffed by professional regulators. And we have 156 professional regulators working at this commission. However, we need more, and that report made a solid justification to increase the size of this agency in order to accommodate many of the new laws and mandates that have been placed upon this commission. Very important mandates with respect to climate issues, labor issues, and others. I'm happy to announce that in the waning days of the Hogan administration, Governor Hogan provided this agency with 3 additional full-time employees, which will increase our ranks. It's noteworthy, even though 3 sounds like a relatively small number, the agency size is the same as it was in 2003 as it is today in 2023. So growing by 3 additional employees is significant, and we will need to grow by more. For those interested, all 3 of those jobs are currently posted on the PSC's website. We have one posting for a grid reliability engineer in the engineering division. We have a new staff attorney position requiring some climate expertise in staff counsel. And finally, we have a climate impact analysis analyst position in the energy analysis and planning division. 2 of those positions close tomorrow at midnight. The climate impact position closes in another week and a half. So for interested parties, for those watching at home, I would bring your attention to those very, very important positions. Additionally, it's been a noteworthy week in Baltimore. Many of you may have heard that the FBI thwarted a neo-Nazi plot to attack a number of substations in the Baltimore Gas and Electric Service territory. The aims of these disturbed individuals were to completely destroy the city of Baltimore. I'd like to commend law enforcement, particularly the FBI, for working this case, for preventing significant damage and potential destruction to our distribution energy equipment. We saw what happened in Washington State in December. We saw what happened in Moore County, North Carolina, with the attack on the Duke substation. You had tens of thousands of people in the heart of winter without power. We've seen an uptick in these attacks over the second half of 2022. People who, for either political, racial, or other bias, understand the criticality of our both distribution and transmission systems. And they're sharing this information on the dark corners of the web. The challenge is for regulators, for law enforcement to stay one step ahead of these actors. Next week, I've been in discussions with FERC Chairman Willie Phillips. Next week, we will be co-hosting a meeting in Washington next Wednesday to discuss this very issue, physical attacks to distribution and transmission system. That'll be 1:30 next Wednesday for those who are interested. But the bottom line is we need to enhance coordination, cooperation between federal and state agencies. This is a new area. A few years ago, it was cyber attacks that we were focused on with respect to the energy systems. It's taken a more disturbing turn now, particularly with this homegrown incident that we're dealing with. But again, my thanks to law enforcement for working this issue to a successful conclusion, and these suspects have now been apprehended. I also have a few additional words on retail competition. I was out last week. I had some comments back at the end of January. I know Commissioner Richard noted the fact that we had a spike in complaints during the month of January, almost near record high. It's a concerning trend that we've seen. The promise of a restructured market more than 20 years ago was to deliver innovation, competition, and customer choice. Just yesterday, I heard from NRG, one of a leading retail suppliers in this state. And NRG is attempting to think outside of the box, and they're offering now customers who switch their default service to NRG service an electric vehicle charger that could charge your car and provide you with a fixed rate and a lower rate overnight when you would presumably charge your car during the day. And you need to read the terms and conditions, but I think that's a fine product for somebody who's just purchasing an electric vehicle. Curiously, I looked up the value of the charger, and it was several $100s, so not an insignificant cost to this retail supplier. And I think it would provide a meaningful option to the consumer. Of course, the consumer must read all the terms and conditions associated with receiving this electric vehicle charger. I was actually interested, and I put in my zip code, but unfortunately it's only being offered in the BGE service territory at this time, not in Pepco. And it's much better than a cheap promo that we've seen before, whether it be Commissioner Herman's mini fridge example that we've heard a lot, gift cards, other less significant products that we've seen used by suppliers to encourage customers to make the switch. And let me say, there is nothing wrong with cheap promos and come-ons and giveaways. There's no rules against giving away gift cards as long as the terms and conditions are clear, what the quid pro quo is. Unfortunately, we do have retail suppliers in our midst that engage in deceit, confusion, and trickery in order to close the deal and effectuate the switch with an unsuspecting customer. I repeat as what I said 2 weeks ago, that those days are over. The Public Service Commission's maximum enforcement campaign is well underway. It took effect now on February 1st, and we are now actively targeting suppliers who appear to be engaging in such conduct. I'd like to specifically cite COMAR, what that conduct prohibits, as well as the Maryland Consumer Protection Act, which is codified in the Maryland Commercial Law. COMAR states that a supplier may not engage in marketing or trade practice that is unfair, false, misleading, or deceptive. And the Consumer Protection Act similarly states that representations of any kind which has the capacity, tendency, or effect of deceiving or misleading customers. Unfortunately, we're seeing too much of that. I'm optimistic that we will clean up the retail supply market, the choice market, for the benefit of both customers, Marylanders, and reputable retail suppliers. However, this has turned into a game of whack-a-mole lately, and it's only picked up its pace. But we will match those suppliers who wish to cheat or trick our customers. It's beyond concerning the fact that we're now in the maximum enforcement campaign, and just Monday I get home, and in my mailbox I received not one but two offers from. I haven't even opened these offers. I think Commissioner O'Donnell could attest. I'm not going to open these offers because they're deceitful from the outside. One of these here makes it look like I received a notice, a threatening notice from Pepco, that they're trying to reach me. Oh, very, very important. You must respond. We're attempting to reach you, in much larger font than the name of the company. This is fraud. This is deception. This will not continue. These customers, these suppliers have no business whatsoever supplying customers in Maryland. Commission staff, particularly the Staff Counsel's Office, the Commission's Consumer Affairs Division, the Office of People's Counsel, all have the responsibility to review supplier marketing materials used in Maryland, and likewise have the authority to instruct such suppliers to cease and desist using such deceptive marketing materials that may violate state law and state regulations. We need support from our utilities, and I know we have a number of our utility council in the room today. Large co-ops, our investor-owned utilities. When you become aware that your name, Pepco, right at the top here, is being used to deceive customers who will ultimately receive a bill from Pepco as their distribution supplier, you have a responsibility to file a complaint with this commission. Utilities, cooperatives cannot be idle participants saying, well, that's retail supply. The commission will handle that on its own. At the end of the day, when you receive a Pepco bill, like the customer's like, my Pepco bill's really, really high, and it's been high. Then we finally review it. It's like, oh no, well, your supply is provided by XYZ Fly-By-Night Company. And Pepco, I'm not picking on Pepco. Pepco's my utility. Well, your bill is high not because of the Pepco distribution charges, it's because you have some sketchy supplier that's been leeching off your bill for Lord knows how long. Months, perhaps years before the customer finds out. That has to change. When Consumer Affairs contacts your utility or your cooperative and asks for a new service number because a particular individual has been slammed 22 times in the past 2 years, revoke that service number, that 22-digit service number, and give that customer a brand new number. We've seen that too, and that's disturbing. Once that service number gets out there on the black market, it gets moved from supplier to supplier. They flip the customer, they slam the customer back and forth. We have documented evidence that occurs. That's the homework assignment for our utilities and cooperatives. We also need support from the retail supply industry and their trade associations. As I stated 2 weeks ago, you have one bad apple, one rotten apple could really affect the entire bushel. The retail supply industry needs to stand up and self-police. Your house is on fire in Maryland, and I just don't see a lot of retail suppliers doing what they need to do, the reputable ones, to combat the scourge that we're currently seeing in our state. I would also remind all retail suppliers to self-report any violations in writing. We've seen some of that, not a tremendous amount. The Compliance and Enforcement Unit in CAD is where you would file those self-reports. And it's not amnesty. I'm not suggesting that if you self-report, there's no repercussions. But I could assure you that if we find the violations on our own, the penalty will be much, much, much more severe. That's all I have to say about this for now, but at the next open meeting, because I've taken enough time and I appreciate my colleagues' indulgence, I'm going to tell you a story about another retail supplier that I take issue with, but we'll save that story for the next administrative meeting. And that's all I have to say about that today. I turn to my colleagues, Commissioner O'Donnell, Commissioner Richard, then Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad you took the time. It's never a waste of our time to really make sure that these issues are not fully vetted in our state. And it is a very powerful statement. So all I'm going to say is everyone should know that I stand shoulder to shoulder with you as we try to root out these bad players in our market and make sure that the customers, are getting a good value. So again, that's all I really want to say because I think your statement was very, very powerful and should stand.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your words, and I would like to strongly affiliate myself with those words. The promise of retail competition in '99 when I was in the legislature was that it would help to reduce prices and be a positive experience for our residential ratepayers. It hasn't worked out that way in 24 years, and it's worked for C&I, and not residential. And we've tried, and we've cajoled, and we've pushed, and we've prodded, and we've issued orders and taken actions, and we've fended off some outside attempts to put the kibosh to this industry. But this industry got to realize it's on very thin ice here, I think, in my opinion, and it better straighten it up, because the promise hasn't been realized and the problems are thick and deep. And unless we get some action, change will take its own course. I have a second thing, Mr. Chairman, that's a little lighter note. Since I associated with myself with your words, I hope you'll associate yourself, and my other colleagues will associate themselves with my words. Go Birds.
There are some in the audience that are shoulder to shoulder with you on that. Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I completely agree with your comments. There's been a lot of effort over the years to make the competitive market work better for our residential customer base. There have been some success stories along the way, but there have been far too many situations where suppliers have taken advantage of customers, and there's really no other way to put it. And they've figured out loopholes, found gaps in areas where our regulations were intended to address a particular problem, and they've done other things to get around them. And in some cases, they've just outright ignored them. And so this is a long-standing and important initiative, and my hope is that it won't just be an initiative, and I don't think that's any of our intent, but I think it's going to be the way business is done in Maryland for the competitive market, that we would expect nothing less than excellence for the citizens of the state and the best product that these companies can offer, delivered in the best way possible. As for Commissioner O'Donnell's comment, as a Raiders fan, I am thoroughly behind you 100%, since it would be very difficult for me to root for the Kansas City Chiefs. Thank you.
Commissioner Bubar.
Thank you. I firmly support everything that you said, Chairman, and agree that it's got to be all hands on deck. This can't be something that just one part of the state can try to fix. We want the market to survive, and I too was kind of interested in the NRG announcement because it provides a choice, and I think that's what this is all about. So we want this market to be able to survive. So we've got to do what we are doing and continue that effort to get rid of the bad actors. Thank you, Chairman. Oh, and as far as Commissioner O'Donnell, no comment. I'm a Steelers fan.
Let's move on quickly. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, did you want to review the minutes?
Oh, thank you. We do have minutes from our last meeting on February 1st, 2023. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved, and before I forget, we will not have a meeting next Wednesday. Our next meeting will be 2 weeks from today. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, there's one item on today's consent agenda. It's an application from IM Telecom LLC DBA Infinity Mobile to expand its eligible telecommunications carrier service area.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, I would move that we allow a 30-day period for any party that believes that the application should be rejected to file comments and find that the expansion of the service area for IM Telecom LLC is in the public interest and grant the company such designation pursuant to Title 47 of the United States Code, Section 214 Echo, for the service territory specified in its application 10 days later, unless adverse comments are received by the Commission prior to that date. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 2 is a request from Potomac Electric Power Company and Delmarva Power and Light Company for a temporary waiver.
Thank you. We'll have staff, and then we'll have Montgomery County take the podium on the right. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. DeAndre Wilson here on behalf of staff. On January 4th, 2023, pursuant to COMAR 2050-0105, PHI, Delmarva, and PEPCO filed a request for a temporary waiver of COMAR 2050-0909A4 and 2050-0910A9 to allow PEPCO and Delmarva to utilize power flow based analysis to evaluate adverse system impacts associated with certain level 1 and 2 interconnection requests at the onset of their technical review of small generator facilities. PHI is making this request because it says that the existing COMAR technical screening criteria for level 1 and 2 small generator facilities is too restrictive and could possibly serve as a barrier to interconnection requests, which could lead to project delays and increased costs. By using power flow analysis at the onset of its technical review, PHI says that it could provide a more granular view of where upgrades or enhanced capabilities are needed, which will allow facilities that exceed the thresholds of level 1 and 2 technical screening criteria to be safely interconnected to the electric grid system. Other benefits include improved hosting capacity calculations, which could help facilitate increased distributed energy resource interconnections. Staff finds good cause for granting the temporary waiver, as the PC44 Interconnection Working Group is currently in Phase 5, discussing ways in which to make power flow the standard analysis method in Maryland, as it offers many advantages and provides a more accurate analysis of interconnection requests compared to the current COMAR technical screens. Staff recommends that the Commission approve PEPCO and Delmarva's request for a temporary waiver of COMAR 2050-0909A4 and 2050-0910A9 for good cause, subject to the condition that the companies fully communicate to any interconnection customer the reasoning for each screen or criteria used to deny a future application when using power flow.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Do we have counsel for Montgomery County with us today? We do not. We have their comments on the record. Good morning, Mr. Seegers.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for both PEPCO and Delmarva Power. Also appearing with me is Mr. Scott Placide, the Manager for Regional Capacity Planning for PHI. We have nothing to add to staff's presentation. We are, of course, amenable to the condition that staff specifies in its buck sheet. We do want to express our sincere appreciation to staff for their very detailed and thorough analysis in their buck sheet. We also want to say thank you to the interconnection group work leader, Mr. John Barkowski, for his willingness to collaborate with us on this issue. With that, we are available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Seegers. I'll turn to Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the parties. I actually had a couple questions for three parties, and the first would be our Executive Secretary. Wanted to make sure that we didn't receive any filings from any other parties, solar companies or other county governments, anyone else.
No, Mr. Commissioner, we have not. No comments besides the comments from Montgomery County.
Okay, thank you. So for our technical staff, good morning. Can you help me to understand why the staff is also supportive of allowing or granting the company a waiver for using the power flow based analysis starting in 2018?
As stated in our buck sheet, staff is in support of using power flow analysis because, again, it allows the company to provide a more detailed analysis of the load of interconnecting new small generator facilities and its impact on the systems. It gives them a more granular view. Also, we've been having discussions with stakeholders, utility companies, and other interested parties in our work group meetings about power flow analysis, and they too have been in agreement with using that, the practice of using power flow analysis methodologies, and it's a best practice that's used throughout the industry. So staff is comfortable with PHI using the power flow analysis, and as we stated, we're discussing moving forward with making that the standard of analysis for screenings of small generator facilities moving forward.
And we didn't have any, as part of the work group sessions, did we have any parties there express any concerns or negative experiences with the PHI companies since 2018 with regard to use of the power flow?
No, we didn't have anyone express negative experiences. There was more concern for the utilization of this method and the utilities being able to meet the deadlines that are outlined in COMAR. So it's a little bit, this level of analysis is a little more involved and may take more time and more resources. So the stakeholders that were or did voice any concern were more concerned about just having the deadlines met.
So if the company's been using power flow based analysis since 2018, and they clearly have had, and I'll ask questions about the impacts of that regarding COMAR in a minute, but if they've been using it since 2018 and they have a record already, why isn't the approach here now instead just to have the company file a plan for commission approval, as COMAR already outlines?
The PC44 interconnection work group are now we're having discussions about power flow analysis and possibly changing regulations in order to accommodate or make that the use of this level of analysis more permissive. And so that may take more time, and that may change or vary from utility to utility because of the uniqueness of each of their different systems. So until we've kind of ironed out those items or those concerns and kind of, gotten a little more refined as to what we actually want COMAR to, how permissive we want COMAR to be in that regard, we're more in favor of a waiver now in order to keep the process of interconnecting small generator facilities at the rate or at the best rate that we possibly can in order to continue to have the state to reach its goals. And then when the time comes when we have finalized some standards or some regulation changes in order to accommodate that, then we're in favor of the utilities maybe filing those reports at a future time.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'll go to the company. What caused the company in 2018 to, instead of filing a waiver, to just proceed with using power flow analysis as opposed to, for example, filing a plan?
In all honesty, Your Honor, it was an inadvertent oversight by the company that we did not come in with a plan. In response to your earlier question of staff in terms of why we are now not coming in with our plan, essentially that is why we made our presentation to the Interconnection Working Group back in October, because we wanted to see if there was consensus about whether or not we should modify the regulations in order to make power flow analyses the standard instead of using the technical screens. And if there was no consensus, or if people were saying, let's just keep the regulation the way it is, then we would have come in with our plan, Your Honor. But given the fact that there is consensus in the working group and there is general support of moving towards the power flow analyses, that's why we thought the waiver was the better approach, just given the fact that it looks like the regulation is going to be changing.
Okay, well, I mean, there'll be a proposal for sure.
Yes.
Okay,
Of course, Your Honor, I shouldn't be
Certainly.
presumptuous.
that's fine. That's fine. Stranger things have happened. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, I won't take up too much more time on this. I guess I think my concern is obvious. I've raised it before, that the regulations have to mean something if we have them and we've adopted them. In this instance, it does sound as though as part of the work group process, The company produced some information that did encourage other parties to be supportive of it and even to explore moving forward with regulation changes. That didn't happen in 2018. It happened sometime subsequent to that. My concern today is not with the use of power flow. I certainly would want to see these interconnections move forward in as efficient way as possible for customer and for companies. My concern is that we do not have a record here to support the request for a waiver. I mean, whatever happened in front of the work group is confidential, as part of the typical work group discussions, but that hasn't been presented to the commission. So we don't have it here, and as our regulations state, we would have received it as part of the plan that we would have approved. The company's already using PowerFlow, and I certainly would see to my colleagues for their questions. My recommendation is that we direct the company to file some additional information so we at least know what's happening beyond what they've been doing since 2018. It's not reaching the point of trying to fine or anything of that sort. I'm not going in that direction at this point. But currently, all we have effectively requesting a waiver for actions the company has taken in violation of COMAR since 2018 is a footnote. And I don't think that's the appropriate way to handle that situation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the parties.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, what additional information would you seek from the PHI companies to satisfy your concern? Because you do raise a legitimate concern, and there is an admission that there was an oversight on behalf of the utility that's been stretched for a number of years now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we can start with the information that's requested in COMAR. And this is that's little a. It basically says a plan subject to commission approval that describes its methodology for its power flow-based modeling system and includes reasoning for each screen used to evaluate an application. In addition to that, I think any information that the company's learned over the course of the last 5 years to give us some understanding, at least for the record, and for all of our many, many YouTube viewers, to understand what we're actually approving, why we're granting a waiver, and we're moving in this direction. Acknowledging the fact, and I certainly do recognize the companies come forward and acknowledge that the inadvertent oversight, but we should have more in our record before we do something, in my opinion, that is as significant as waiving a regulation.
Mr. Seegers, can you respond? Can you provide that additional information if the commission today approves the request for temporary waiver subject to filing this information that Commissioner Linton seeks?
Yes, I believe we can, Your Honor. If what Commissioner Linton is seeking is essentially what our power flow models look like and what we've learned over that time span. Am I capturing that correctly, Your Honor?
I think so. I think right now, since 2018, the company's been doing this work, and we have a footnote request for a waiver. So I think we should have more than that. So I guess in addition to that, any information that you have that's more of a lesson learned, again, for the commission as a whole, as we are being asked to waive a regulation that's been in effect and hasn't been followed.
Understood, Your Honor. I can certainly attest that the company does not take any noncompliance with COMAR lightly. This is not something that we're happy about appearing before the commission. What I can say is that once we discovered this, we did a deep dive in terms of our interconnection processes to make sure that there were no other non-compliance with COMAR, and we did not find any. This was the only non-compliance matter that we found, Your Honor. If that helps at all.
All right, that's good to know. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
So just on follow-up, and I have some questions for staff, and maybe an additional question for the company, but to follow up, when did you become aware that you weren't in compliance with COMAR?
It was, I'd say around third quarter last year, roughly.
And did you begin a process to develop a plan as alluded to by Commissioner Linton and required by COMAR?
We have a process in place of how we use the power flow analysis.
Yeah, and I'm talking about a plan to submit to the commission for approval. I think that's what's required.
Well, that is, as I mentioned before, that is one of the reasons that we made our presentation to the interconnection working group, because
Yeah, but I'm talking about the COMAR and making progress towards submitting a plan to the commission as required by COMAR, not to the work group, but to the commission.
in terms of developing a filing of our processes, we did not begin that just because of the fact that we wanted to know, as I mentioned before, if there was consensus around possibly changing the regulation. If there had been no consensus, then we would have come forward with that filing to ask for approval of our plan. But given the fact that there was consensus, that is why we felt the waiver was the better approach, Your Honor.
So when you found out you weren't in compliance in the third quarter of last year, did you file with the commission highlighting that you weren't in compliance?
No, Your Honor. That is essentially by submitting our waiver request. That is our self-report, Your Honor.
Kinda, maybe, I don't know, tangentially. It's not a filing saying we're not in compliance with COMAR. It's a request to cover yourself, what it is. All right, let me ask staff a question. How long does staff believe the working group will be kicking this idea around before it comes up with some prospective regulations?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. John Borkowski for staff. In direct response to Commissioner O'Donnell's question, it's hard to say when we might be coming to the Commission with a firm recommendation. We're not only weighing power flow, but we're weighing a number of other considerations. And of course, we will bring our Phase 5 recommendations to the Commission at an appropriate time when we have, a sufficient body of recommendations to bring forward. We're not going to piecemeal it and bring something forward each time we solve a problem. But I would like to just say that, from my perspective as the work group leader, I appreciate Pepco Holdings in the way that they, more than all the other utilities involved in the work group, are constantly pushing the envelope as far as advancing grid modernization. A number of the things that we've already pursued with the work group in the past have been a result of the fact that we're just taking things that Pepco Holdings has developed and codifying some of these things. So this is an example, power flow is an example of something that we need to change in Maryland. And I'm grateful to some extent that Pepco Holdings is moving forward. They're the only utility in Maryland that is modeling secondary voltage systems and applying technical evaluations to secondary voltage systems rather than using these rules of thumb. I do think that with the advance of smart inverters, we're going to have, hopefully, by 2024, we've already had with RM77 regulations promulgated, but we're going to be having smart inverters, and really power flow is the only technique to take full advantage of understanding the impacts of smart inverters, and I do see many benefits to Maryland for employing power flow. So to some extent that is behind staff's rationale. I think we found it hard to be overly critical of a utility that's pushing grid modernization forward in Maryland and helping us to that extent. So I still believe, on behalf of staff, in our recommendation, which is to issue the waiver and with the condition, subject to the condition, because I think that really, the intent of having a power flow plan brought to the commission is really just to highlight the types of screens, technical criteria that a utility is using with power flow. And to the extent that that's embodied in our condition, that, if we deny, if the utility denies any application, that they be fully transparent about why, what the criteria that was violated and was in their explanation to the interconnection customer. I feel like that satisfies some of the intent behind the original regulation. So again, I really, would still like to recommend to the commission staff's recommendation that we apply the waiver subject to the condition. I don't necessarily believe it is particularly valuable to go back and have the utility file a power flow plan with the commission, because I think we're moving forward, and hopefully we'll be in a position sometime in the next year to offer a new set of recommendations to the commission.
Chief, I appreciate you giving a long answer and presentation to my question, but I have a very different perspective. And my perspective is, notwithstanding the cooperative nature of Pepco Holdings in this working group and the work they've done, which is commendable, it doesn't alleviate their obligation to follow COMAR. And part of my job, part of our job, as I see it, is to ensure the inviolability of compliance to COMAR and not making value judgments. That's okay. It's not too bad. We appreciate you being a good guy, and therefore it's okay. I have a very different view. I'm not asking you to respond to that. I'm just saying that I look at things a little differently. But I hear you say things like, hard to say when we might get there, hard to say when we might bring something forward, hard to say if we do bring something forward. I think we're making progress in this area, but these waivers will be in effect until when? Ad infinitum, until we take action, right? So there could be another commission up here in some years, and they'll say, what the heck did the commission approve these waivers for, and why are they still in effect? Assuming no other actions take place or bear fruit in the working group or elsewise. And so that's my concern. Did the staff consider putting not a sunset provision, but almost a tickler provision to bring this before the commission on a periodic basis, so we can ask what the progress is, so we can see where we're making progress in this? Because I don't have a lot of confidence. I have a high degree of confidence in the working groups, but sometimes they get bogged down reaching consensus, and you know that, and I know that, and things drag on forever, especially when some party somewhere doesn't want to do something. So could we, if we were to approve these, could we put in a time period that they're approved for and then come back for reconsideration? Because if not, these things could be on the books forever. And since I've been here, I've seen stuff that were on the books, and we scratch our head and say, how the heck did that get on the books? Why did they ever do that? And I fear this is one of those areas that we may be setting ourselves up for. Can you comment on that?
Well, I agree that it would be nice to have a target out there. I'm not disagreeing. However, the work we're doing is complex. We have not been wishy-washy about, bringing things forward in the past. In general, we're on phase 5. We started, at least I started with this in late 2017. So roughly, every year and a half, we're bringing recommendations forward. It takes time. The stakeholder process takes time. We're dealing with other weighty issues like cost allocation, things of that nature. So it's very hard to definitively state, when we might come forward. But I would think, just based on the track record of our work group, you can expect something in a year and a half.
So you would be opposed to just coming before this commission and giving us a progress update
No,
at a
no.
specified date?
Okay, I'm sorry if I misunderstood, but I would not be opposed to any periodic update of the commission
That's all I'm
on the
suggesting.
progress.
That's all I'm suggesting, so we can keep your feet to the fire and the work groups and the utilities' feet to the fire to say, where is this? And not let it meander forever without any scrutiny by us.
None of my work groups have ever meandered forever.
Well, I'm not accusing you. I'm just saying it's the nature of the work sometimes. Things don't make progress. Don't take it personal, Chief. It's not personal.
Chief Borkowski, would a 1-year check-in be appropriate?
1 year or sooner. I can come every 6 months. I can do whatever the commission desires.
Okay, thank you, sir. Additional questions? Commissioner Boomer.
Thank you. I can support Commissioner Linton's request to get more information on the record, and thank you for answering the question that you think you could do that. Does the utility have an estimate of how many interconnection requests you're anticipating receiving during this time period if we would grant the waiver and whenever PC 44 work group would make a final recommendation or would have a rule?
I would start with the caveat that it's hard to estimate that, since, as Mr. Borkowski indicated, we're not sure exactly when we'll be able to come forward with a regulation, but we can try to ballpark it, Your Honor.
Not offhand, but we could come back.
If you could step to the microphone, please state your name.
Sorry, yes, Scott Placide, manager within Pepco Holdings Delmarva, and Pepco's capacity planning analytics group. Yes, we receive thousands of level 1, level 2 applications per year. We could come up with an estimate. If you
Okay, that's the range we're in, though, thousands. Okay. And I'd like to better understand the information on the deadlines. So the staff paper notes that the interconnection deadlines must still be met and that they're going to be met. In this time period since 2018, when you've been using the power flow analysis, have the deadlines been met? And I'm just trying to understand, if we've had an issue in meeting the deadlines and it will improve with power flow, or have you been meeting the deadlines because you've been using power flow?
To answer your question, Your Honor, yes, we have been meeting the deadlines. I pulled the annual interconnection reports that we have to file with the commission by April of each year. Last year, these are the most up-to-date numbers that we have. For Pepco, for the review timelines, we met the threshold for 99% of the interconnection requests. For timeliness to approve to install, it was 92%, Your Honor. For Delmarva Power, for the timeliness of review, it was 96% that met the Comar timelines. For the timeliness to approve to install, it was 98%, Your Honor. I would also note that in the Commission's order approving the Exelon PHI merger, there is a condition that says that as part of our annual interconnection reports, if there are delays that impact more than 10% of the interconnection requests in a reporting year, we need to include in our report our plans and associated costs to address and eliminate the delays. And we will, of course, comply with that. Hopefully, we won't get to that point, Your Honor. But I did want to highlight that as well.
So do you anticipate those percentages getting better if we approve this waiver, or are those percentages kind of where we will be because you've been using the power flow?
Well, given the
analysis?
fact that we have been using the power flow, Your Honor, I think those are the percentages that we can approximately expect.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chief Workowski. I did hear you say that, while Pepco is moving forward with this power flow analysis, some of the other companies are still contemplating, and if I'm hearing you correctly, this is a good practice that is happening in other places, particularly places like Maryland where we have very aggressive DER and renewable goals. So, I'm personally very supportive of moving forward today with this waiver. But is there something we can do that also applies to the other companies that ensures that we're doing these good practices across the board, so that we can be very responsive and make sure that we are taking care of these interconnections in the most expeditious fashion possible?
Yes, Commissioner Richard, thank you for that question. I think that we would like to see all the utilities, at least for primary voltage systems, using power flow. The problem where there might need to be some exemptions or exceptions in our future regulation that we're seeing at this point is with secondary voltage systems. This is the distribution transformer, 208, 120 type systems versus the 13,000 volt systems. So I do think that it will take us a long time to get to that point, but for primary voltage systems, I really feel that it should be within the capabilities of most utilities to be able to employ power flow, and hopefully we can bring a regulation to the commission to that extent.
Okay, well, thank you for that, because I certainly applaud the company for its efforts to be responsive and to move expeditiously with these interconnections that I know are very important that we pursue in this state. And to the work group, I think there has been a very deliberative process. I have full respect for concerns that we are compliant with COMAR, but we do have the waiver process in place, and we, as a living commission, are able to again make some judgments, discernment. So I certainly, just speaking for myself, wouldn't want to be a commissioner that slows down in any of this innovation at all, and that we encourage our companies to move as quickly as possible in grid modernization and particularly in interconnection process. So I do fully support the waiver, and if there are some appropriate conditions, I'd be good with that. But I just want to make sure that we are not, again, slowing the innovations and interconnections from the bench here.
Thank you, Commissioner Richard. I agree with your remarks. Chief Borkowski and the engineers on your team, thank you for working this issue. Commissioner Linton raises a good point, as echoed by Commissioner O'Donnell, that violations of COMAR are serious. They need to be reported. Although in this case, I do conduct a cost-benefit test. We have the waiver authority, and we use it when appropriate. But here it's a temporary waiver, so it's not open-ended. When a new commission is here in 5 years and they're trying to figure out what we did back in 2023. I'm going to propose a motion, and I would note that Montgomery County, who's not here today, fully supports the staff recommendation. I would propose a motion that would accommodate Commissioner Linton's request for this additional information. That should be on the record. It may take PHI a little bit of time to collect and file. How long do you think it would take, Mr. Seegers?
If I could have a moment, Your Honor.
Are you going to take care of my concerns, getting them back in here periodically?
I'll say something, but I can trust Chief Borkowski to give us a periodic update. I got something else to tell you about.
I think we could prepare that filing in approximately 3 months, Your Honor, if that's acceptable to the
I
commission.
had 90 days here, so 3 months, 90 days. Thank you. And to Commissioner O'Donnell's concern, Chief Borkowski, if your team could provide those periodic updates when able. I know I said 1 year, you said 6 months. Leave it to your discretion, sir. I would move that we approve the company's request for a temporary waiver of COMAR Title 20, Subtitle 50, Chapter 9, Regulation 9A as in Adam 4, and Title 20, Subtitle 50, Chapter 9, Regulation 10, Atom 9, subject to the condition that the companies fully communicate to any interconnection customer the reasoning for each screen criteria used to deny a future application when using PowerFlow, and to respond to the information requested by Commissioner Linton within 90 days. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 3 is a revised application from the Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, Inc. for a vehicle charging program.
Good morning, Mr. Justy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Anson Justy on behalf of staff. Good to see you in the office again, Commissioner O'Donnell. On September 23rd, 2022, Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, SMECO, filed its application for a residential and multi-unit dwelling electric vehicle charging program. The Commission heard the case in an administrative hearing on November 9th, 2022, at which time staff recommended program modifications. On December 20th, 2022, the cooperative filed its program revisions based on staff's recommendations, including a new budget reducing the program cost by $666,000. The program will predominantly focus on installing multi-unit dwelling electric vehicle charging stations. The cooperative was also requested to file an additional benefit cost analysis for the program. The cooperative supplementally filed an aggregate program benefit cost ratio for the primary Maryland jurisdiction specific test of 1.15, indicating more benefits than costs. Staff recommends the Commission accept SMECO's revised application for residential and multi-unit dwelling electric vehicle charging program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Justy. Mr. Hoover, you look very comfortable back there. Did you wish to speak? We've reviewed your comments. I leave the option to you.
Fred Hoover on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel. I'll just reiterate that we appreciate the revisions that SMECO made in its original proposal, and we support the adoption.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. McDougall.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Mark McDougall on behalf of SMECO. I have no further comments and am here for any questions that the Commission might have.
Thank you. I appreciate the cooperative responding to the Commission's concerns and statements of November 9. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McDougall, I wanted to ask you about where these multi-unit dwelling chargers will be located. It wasn't clear to me where they will be.
That is a good question, so good that I can't answer it. I'm going to turn to Mr. Shaw, who is behind me in the audience, and I think he'll be able to answer that question for you.
Morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Jeff Shaw on behalf of SMECO. Those would be throughout the service territory. We don't have places that I could point to exactly today. We would reach out to those multifamily areas that we've worked with previously through the Empower Maryland programs and done multifamily retrofit work, so those would be our first attempts. So.
Let me clarify my question because I appreciate your answer, but I was looking for a more generic siting location. So other utilities have come in with multifamily proposals under this docket that said we want multifamily, multi-unit dwelling, apartment complexes, whatever, call them whatever you want, to be located within a mile or two of that dwelling. And we've rejected that consistently. Where will SMECO be placing their chargers for this? Will they be on the premises, or will they be within a certain radius at another business? Where do you propose to put these things?
It is our intention to place those on the premises, on the property of the multifamily.
So that's a commitment that they'll be on the premises?
That is our commitment, yes, sir.
Okay. 'Cause I just wanted to make sure we weren't looking at the previously recycled options we were given to locate these things within a mile or two. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any additional? Commissioner Bubar.
Yeah, I kind of have a follow-up question. It says if demand, the company wants to know if demand is greater than anticipated, that you'll use income information to guide decisions on where future installations would be. I was wondering, is that a criteria to guide your initial decisions? Looking at low or moderate income as to where these would be located?
Those are part of what we're going to do in the review process. We've reviewed our service territory for those environmental justice areas. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of defined EJ communities within the service territory, but those will be our first, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional questions, I would move that we accept the cooperative's revised application for a residential and multi-unit dwelling electric vehicle charging program. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 4 consists of revised electric vehicle tariffs from Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, Potomac Electric Power Company, and Delmarva Power and Light Company.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Anson Justy from staff. Please note there's a typo on page 2 of the buck sheet. That recommendation in the summary section says an effective date of February 1st. That should be February 8th, as it is in the beginning and ending recommendation section.
Thank you.
On December 20th, 2022, the Exelon Joint Utilities, Exelon including Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, BGE, Potomac Electric Power Company, PEPCO, Delmarva Power and Light Company, Delmarva, submitted changes for their utility-owned electric vehicle public charging tariffs for their Smart Charge Management Project's demand response events as part of their grant funded by the U.S. Department of Energy and Maryland ratepayers. The tariff changes explain the project to customers and show the minimum charging rate that can occur as part of the project. Each of the Exelon utilities will conduct approximately 30 events each year between the program approval date and December 2024. Each event would take place at the individual charger level or the network-wide level and would reduce EV charging capacity and the price at the same time for 2 to 4 hours on average. The goal of this program is to study how customers respond to reduced charging capacities and prices to inform pricing policies that could aid in shifting demand to more optimal times as the grid becomes more electrified. It is possible for customers to opt out of these demand response events and receive full charging capacity and prices, but this opt-out would occur through the company's vendor app that a minority of EV drivers in Maryland currently use. The utilities have indicated that their additional plans for informing customers of these events include social media and broadcasts on a different EV charging station locating app. The utilities also have quarterly email communications with EV drivers registered in their systems. Staff recommends the Commission accept the tariff revisions as filed with an effective date of February 8th, 2023, and that the utilities include this study's progress as part of the semi-annual EV reports.
Thank you, Mr. Justy. Counsel for the Joint Utilities.
Good morning, Commissioners. Joel Michelle on behalf of BGE. With me is Stephanie Leach, our Principal Business Analyst, along with Christy Fleischman-Gronke, our Senior Manager of Strategic Planning. We thank staff for its thorough analysis. We don't have a formal presentation, but we are available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Michel. Seeing none. Seeing one. Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you. I'm glad to see these types of programs, specifically around managed charging and demand response. It did strike me as pretty expensive. Are we talking about a $5 million program? And does that mean we're also going to have an expectation of a $5 million cost share? Is it for just this particular exercise, or is this for a broader suite of of management programs, charge management programs?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Stephanie Leach for BGE. So this is this is the proposal today is part of our larger Smart Charge Management pilot program, which was already approved on October 6, 2021, case number 9478. So there is cost share required for that program. We got a $5 million grant from the Department of Energy, and there's about $6 million required for cost share. That cost share portion is being funded from our existing EV Smart programs, so there's no additional cost share needed. So majority of that cost share is already being brought in from installations that we're doing through the public charging network and labor associated with staff supporting our EV Smart programs. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I think you did. So this is just one component of a broader management program, charging management program.
this is our management program. So this is our public portion. We've already gotten approval for the residential and fleet portion, which we filed in 2021.
So just running this exercise, help me with some of the cost drivers. It just strikes me as you said it's $5 million in grant and $6 million in cost share. So this is an $11 million program.
Correct. So we have the residential portion of the program where we're enrolling up to 4,000 customers. We already have about,
this is there's a residential side, and what
Yes.
we're talking about today is the public
it's just
side.
the public side.
Okay. Oh, that helps me. Okay, and then as far as so people will be notified. If I look, and the reason I'm asking this question because when we're talking about the public network, generally when I'm using public network, it's more because I need to get a charge. I'm out driving, and I haven't been able to charge at home or at the office. So where these public will not then be available to people who don't have the Shell Recharge app. They will just be directed to it by possibly another app, and then once they get there, they will realize they're not getting their fast charge. Is that what the experience is going to be for the driver?
Somewhat. The chargers will be available, but during the demand response event, they will be available for reduced kilowatt output. So we're running these demonstrations basically either at a public network-wide level where all of our public chargers will be participating in the demand response event, both at BGE and PHI. So at one of those types of events, we will reduce the output of the chargers and simultaneously reduce the cost that a customer will pay. We will notify customers via the Shell Recharge Solution app, which is the vendor that we work with. And we'll also do broadcast communication on PlugShare, social media, email communication to customers to try to notify them in advance. Unfortunately, we can't put a message on any sort of screen at the charger. They don't have that capability. And we'll also be doing other types of demonstrations that are site-specific. So if we're seeing that a particular feeder in a neighborhood is overwhelmed, we might be doing site-specific demonstrations where we'll only do a demand response event at one particular site.
Okay. And will these, are you going to be choosing, I guess for lack of a better word, real events, days when you're experiencing high usage, or are you just going to have random, dates just to test the system?
As much as possible, we're going to try to identify days where we're seeing peak usage or, high price signals. But we also will just be, in order to maximize the amount of tests we can do, we will likely have to just perform tests on a given day.
Okay, just a thought. I'm supportive of this. I want us to see us do anything we can for managed charging. I'm just kind of really going to the customer experience here, and when I'm out and I need a fast charger, it's because I'm getting low and I still have a long way to go, and I'm not near home. So that could be a concern. And if I was not aware and did not notice my recharge app was telling me that, it is a concern. So I have some other questions, but I am supportive. I just would ask that the company keep in mind the customer experience here and make sure that people, particularly with the network that's being run by BGE, Maryland doesn't get a reputation of having bad chargers or a place you don't want to, suddenly run low because of, the possibility you hit one of these dates. So again, I'll just go ahead and stop there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think the benefits of the study will yield some valuable results. I am glad that it's not no charge. You'll get a reduced charge.
Yeah,
So
no.
it's better than nothing. And to the extent that you could advertise on PlugShare and on other apps in case the member is not a member of Shell Recharge, that's helpful because I think it would be safe to say if we plan a long road trip, we probably know what charger we're planning to stop at along the way. And if we see that notice a day in advance, we might be at 25% output. Might look for a different charger.
Yeah.
Commissioner Linton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two things. One, I wanted to echo the comments and questions from Commissioner Richard. Certainly, I think my charging experience might be a little bit different, but Generally speaking, if you need it, you need to have it working. And there's a number of other challenges that can come along with it if it's not working. But I was just curious in terms of trying to understand when you would decide to have in a particular event to reduce the charging ability of a particular charger. And I'm thinking more of the for folks who have who could use a DC fast charger, for example. Are you focusing more on the grid itself, just how charges, how costs are flowing that way? Are you thinking more about or does it have any impact regarding the charger itself and where it might be located? Like, for example, would you consider reducing the ability of a charger in Annapolis on Sine Die? Or would you say, oh no, we won't do it on Sine Die because everybody's going to be there, and so people will need the chargers at that time?
Great question. So we're looking at both of those types of scenarios. So both a network-wide charging demonstration, a demand response event, to see how we can reduce load on our entire grid, to see how potentially we could bid in this type of asset to PJM in the future. We're also looking at site-specific charging events, like you mentioned, perhaps in Annapolis. I would say that we will do our best to avoid charging locations where there's a large event going on or on particular days where we're expecting a lot of travel, as to not inconvenience customers who need a charge and are expecting to get, the full charge on those days.
Right. So at holidays, for example, when people are going to be traveling, and we know people are going to be traveling, there might also be at the same time an event on the grid. I mean, in the middle of the summer, you never know when the hot days are going to hit. And if everybody's traveling for the 4th of July and it's still a hot day, you kind of have two competing interests there. So how are you going to weigh to determine which one wins out?
Yes. So in those types of scenarios, considering that this is not at this time an asset that's being bid into PJM, we likely would not try to inconvenience customers. But, taking learnings from this demonstration, we could in the future, just because this is a managed charging program and the goal is to offset that type of load in the future, we could potentially be doing that in the future, but not for this demonstration.
Okay. All right. Just one additional question. It's a bit off from the proposal that you have before us today, but with regard to charging equipment being installed in Baltimore City, I know there was some challenge earlier in the pilot where the company had some challenges getting equipment installed there. I'm assuming, and I'd heard along the way that things had gotten a lot better. I'm assuming that's still the case.
Good morning, Christy Fleischman-Gronke with BGE. Yes, we've made a lot of progress with Baltimore City. They're one of the higher counties and cities that we have charging stations allocated for at this point. So moving along, it's a little bit of a longer process to go through all of their approvals, but we're making great progress in Baltimore City.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all. I was going to ask a question about icing, but
Well, I wanted to follow that because at the PSC offices on Northwest Street, we have a couple. Miss Grunke, if you could approach. At the corner of Calvert and Northwest, we have our small satellite office there, and there are 4 brand new BGE L2 chargers there. This has been an issue statewide, and I know there's been some legislative attempts to cure signage issues. In this particular place, I know both Commissioner Richard and Commissioner Linton use these chargers at our office there. But the curb is still painted yellow. The signs say residential parking. There are new signs that say electric vehicle parking, not electric vehicle charging. And then there's another couple signs that say only DGS secretary could park here. And you'll be towed. So taking 4 signs together and then parking next to a yellow curb, which I don't want to do, but that's where the charger is. And half the time, unfortunately, other combustion engine vehicles are blocking, if not 2, 4 of the spaces. Can you give us, this deviates a lot from your filing here, an insight on how we deal with municipalities to clean up this mess of signs?
Sure, I could take that site back and talk to the DGS about correcting that. We don't own a lot of the signage there, so we try to have conversations, with our site hosts about other signage and the appropriate signage. But, we're kind of at the mercy of the site hosts in a lot of cases because we don't own that property or the signage that they've installed.
Some of the signage has been there for years, right? So this is municipally owned signage, either City of Annapolis or State of Maryland. What's your opinion on the BGE, the brand new signs that were posted that say electric vehicle parking only? Because I could see that. I could pull up fully charged and say, I'm going to park here all day.
I'll take that back to the team. My impression of the signs we were using saying electric vehicle charging only, but maybe we've gotten a new batch that has different language on it. So I'll take that back and look at that location and swap it out with our signs if they are in.
Thank you. No, and I'm not asking you to swap it out, but they currently do say EV parking only. And obviously there's a distinction because there are some EV drivers that will plug in. They only might need about 30 minutes worth of charge or less, but take up the space for an hour or 8 hours. We see that at train stations, metro stations, MARC stations, where I think it puts the commuters in a really interesting situation because you won't be on the train back until 5 o'clock. So something food for thought. I deviate. Thank you for my colleague's indulgence.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just one more suggestion. I know I'm not an urban planner, but it would seem to me that for situations like the one next to our offices in Annapolis, lines on the street defining where the parking spot actually is might give a little guidance for a person, assuming someone does want to park there and not charge, but really just wants to park there.
Yep.
Maybe they would just use one spot as opposed to blocking 3 of them.
We could take that back to the city of Annapolis. In most locations where we're putting the charging stations, we're painting the entire parking spot green, with the EV charging symbol on it. But Annapolis has a lot of restrictions on, going outside of their approved landscape. So that might have been the case why we didn't do the colored parking spaces in that installation.
Thank you, Ms. Grunke. Commissioner Bubar.
Thank you. Will there be a general announcement about this program before it starts so that, and you can use that to encourage people to get onto the app? Just, how will people kind of anticipate that this is coming?
So for the public program, yes, we will be including it in our all EV customer communication that we send out bi-monthly. So that'll be in our next one.
Okay. And will decisions about the length of the events be made while the event's happening or prior to the event beginning?
Prior to the event, so we have to plan the event at least a day before, and we will be planning the events pretty much right after the following event, taking learnings from previous events to try to understand length of time of the event, best reductions to understand what's going to benefit the grid best and benefit customer expectations best.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, I would move that we accept the tariff provisions for filing with an effective date of February 8, 2023, and direct the companies to include the study's progress as a part of their semi-annual EV reports. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, item number 5 is a request from AES Warrior Run for authorization to conduct a test burn.
Good morning, Mr. Austin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Roger Austin on behalf of staff. On January 13th, 2023, AES filed a request for the Commission's authorization to conduct a test burn consisting of co-firing raw biomass with the bituminous coal feedstock currently utilized at its Warrior Run generation station located in Cumberland. The Commission may grant the requested authorization if it determines that the test burn will not require modification of the generation station as described in Public Utilities Article Section 7-205A, and will not result in increased air emissions greater than the limits defined in COMAR 20.79.01.08. If these conditions are not met, then AES will be required to obtain authorization from the Commission under the more rigorous requirements of PUA Section 7-205B. The Maryland Department of the Environment, Air and Radiation Administration, MDEARA, the state agency with responsibility for these matters, has determined that no physical changes or changes in the method of operation of the plant are planned for the combustion test. MDEARA has also worked with AES in the development of its test burn plan and has concluded that little to no difference in emissions of sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, or volatile organic compounds during the proposed testing period is anticipated. More specifically, MDEARA has determined that there will be no emissions increases greater than the thresholds defined in COMAR 20.79.01.08 of 75,000 tons per year of carbon dioxide or 1 ton per year for any other pollutants during the proposed testing period. MDEARA therefore agrees that AES can be authorized to conduct the requested test burn provided the company meets certain reporting requirements. Staff recommends that the Commission approve AES Warrior Run's request for authorization to conduct a combustion test co-firing raw biomass with coal based on the testing and monitoring plans AES proposed in its correspondence with MDEARA dated November 3rd, 2022, December 7th, 2022, and December 21st, 2022, on the condition that AES, A, submit a formal test burn protocol for review and approval prior to conducting the test, and B, notify MDEARA of the initial start and end date of the proposed testing period and submit the test burn results to MDEARA within 60 days from the completion of the test. And Mr. Commissioner, I can attempt to answer any questions the commissioners may have, but I should say that the real technical experts working on these matters on behalf of the state are the folks at MDE, and I don't believe any of them are here today.
Thank you.
I would draw your attention to the letter included in the company's filing dated January 9th, where MDE describes their review of the company's test plan and the conclusions that they reached.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Good morning, Mr. Quinn.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Brian Quinn here this morning on behalf of AES Warrior Run. I have Mr. John Ryman with me from AES here to answer any questions. Want to thank staff for their buck sheet. Obviously, we agree and support staff's recommendation, and we're here to answer any questions you might have. The letter of which staff speaks is attached as Exhibit B to our application. Here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Questions for the parties? Seeing,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
So, I read this item, it gave me a little pause for concern in that it feels like an experiment. I think that's generally what it is. It's an experimentation with a burn. Okay, fine. We typically don't deal with that, but we do have some legal requirements to evaluate emissions impact for CPCNs that have been issued and facilities that have emissions limitations. But as I read the buck sheet, if you look at Public Utility Article 7-205, it provides that a modification is something that could result in a change of air emissions from the plant or from a generating unit of the plant. And it also says that modifications does not include a change that the commission determines will not result in an increase in air emissions from the plant, from a generating unit of the plant. And then Comar goes on to say the change has to be either 75,000 tons or 1 ton or more emission over other regulated pollutants in a year. We don't reach any of those thresholds here. So I'm kind of in my mind, why are we approving this experiment if we don't meet the the legal emissions threshold that require us to evaluate this test? And I don't know who should answer it, Mr. Austin or the company. It looks like the company's willing to take it, so.
I'm happy to answer that, Commissioner O'Donnell. Yeah, the regulation reads the commission needs to determine whether or not the emissions result exceed the de minimis levels in the exception there. The only way for the commission to do that is to have a test burn. This will provide evidence of that. Right now, it's the example, the report that's included with our request to MDE, and which MDE approved. That's a report. We haven't conducted the test burn yet, and that's the point of it.
So we're approving this test to validate MDE's analysis.
It's to provide additional data and to determine next steps, if any.
So then am I supposed to think that those legal requirements that I covered in 7-205 and the Comar always have to be tested by an approval of the commission?
There's a history here, Commissioner O'Donnell. Technically, I suppose a company could risk not asking permission for a test burn, but that's been the standard. These test burns have been approved in several examples over the last 15, 20 years. If you're referring to a recent request where there wasn't a request for a test burn, I can't speak to that particular company, but these have been approved, and I can cite to you the several examples over the last 15 or 20 years that test burns have been approved similar, exactly the same as the one here for different materials, different
I
locations.
appreciate that, Mr. Quinn. It feels like, to me, that's the way we've always done it, so we got to keep doing it that way. I'm just trying to figure out what is the purpose of those limitations in the PUA or the Comar if I have to validate them every time someone wants to do a test?
Yep. Commissioner O'Donnell, if a company would come in and ask for a permanent change in fuel source, then it would need to be determined whether or not those de minimis exception limits are exceeded or not. And so all that data would be used to support an application to permanently change fuel sources. Here, we're attempting to collect some data in anticipation of next steps, if any. That's all I can.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with
Yeah.
that. I just don't know, as Mr. Austin said, that we're the agency that has the technical expertise to evaluate the air emissions. MDE has that. We don't.
I don't disagree with you, Commissioner O'Donnell, and MDE is fine with this approach, as you can tell in their letter. But I agree with you. MDE is the expert here, and
Are they
we
going
follow
to do? Are
this.
they going to do measurements during this test burn?
We are, yes, and we have to report our
MDE's
results.
not. So you're going to do them and report them to MDE.
Yeah, MDE will be witnessing some of the test burn as well. And we're required to submit the results to them within 60 days.
What's the chance anything could go awry during this test burn?
Can you define awry?
How about boom?
How about
Explosion.
well,
Something goes wrong. There's a catastrophic failure. If you want some technical terms, I can whip some on you, but something goes wrong that's unanticipated, like a failure of the test that causes structural failures and or plant damage and or human injury.
Commissioner O'Donnell, Mr. Ryman from the company might take a crack at answering your question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner, Chairman. John Ryman, AES Corporation. Certainly, this is a large boiler. Anything could could happen. We don't anticipate that. This boiler is well equipped to co-combust these types of materials. So this is a circulating fluidized bed boiler, has great latitude on the type of fuels it can combust to generate electricity. So we've done this test before at subsidiaries. We don't believe this to be an issue going forward. And again, we're going to do in small volumes as we evaluate impacts to both emissions and balance of plant equipment.
And assume there is damage to the plant, although the likelihood sounds very small as you describe it. But assume, arguendo, there is some damage to the plant. Who would pay to repair that? This is a purple plant. Who pays to repair that?
Yeah, this is a risk that AES is taking on.
So AES would pay.
Right.
Ratepayers wouldn't pick anything up on it.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Richard.
Just a quick follow-up from Commissioner O'Donnell's questions. So, will this result in any changes to the PURPA contract, to the power purchase agreement at all?
No, sir.
No, okay. Now, I'm guessing if the test is successful, is the company intending to come up with a new fuel mix that could change, I guess, the cost structure for how this plant operates?
Well, certainly that's part of our analysis. You know, there's a lot to look into, right? So this is a different fuel, and we're looking at all balance of plant equipment, material handling, how it performs, and then, you know, once we get that data back, you know, we'll go back and complete our engineering analysis associated with this. But, you know, we anticipate this is a fuel that might be in the future plans for the facility.
Okay. And just curious, I mean, would this, if there is a positive, I guess, impact on expenses to run the plant, does any of that go back to, I guess, the ratepayers, or is this just a benefit to the plant owners?
Well, we don't know. We have not procured any materials for this test right now, so the economic feasibility really hasn't been completed to date. But we will be taking that into account as we decide to move forward, you know, once we complete this limited, you know, combustion test.
Okay, so it could have an impact on the expenses,
It
you know,
is possible.
the business model for this plant. Do any of those, if there is a benefit, will any of that, you know, accrue to the, I guess, the ratepayers in Western Maryland?
I would think we'd be informed by the preliminary test, and if we move forward, and we'd have to, you know, if this is a fuel that would be advanced in the future, we'd have to look. There'd be a significant capital expense associated with, you know, a permanent switch to this type of material.
Okay. All right, so TBD. I guess that doesn't really impact our decision today, but just interested to know. I just wanted to clarify, and probably for staff, we are, I guess it appears, a co-regulator in this sense. So MDE, ARA has signed off?
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, just want to make sure that we're doing this.
Under January 9th.
And they've done it first, so we're not the ones that you know, are necessarily going to be authorizing this independently. Okay, good. And then as far as the test results, that'll be up to MDE. I guess the question is, will that be up to MDA, ARA, whether or not they can continue to operate with this new fuel mix?
Yes.
Okay, and will we be involved in that decision at all?
I don't believe we need to be.
Okay, so it's just a modification. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I would move that we approve the AES Warrior Run's request for authorization to conduct a combustion test co-firing raw biomass with coal-based on the testing and monitoring plans AES proposed in its correspondence with MDE ARA dated November 3rd, December 7th, and December 21st of last year, on the condition that AES, number 1, submit a formal test burn protocol for review and approval prior to conducting the test. Number 2, notify MDE of the initial start and end date of the proposed testing period. And number 3, submit the test burn results to MDE within 60 days from the completion of the test. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linden.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. The commission will have its closed session today at 12:30 p.m. with nothing else remaining. This meeting is adjourned.